will give you the stock value in specific identification. Specific identification is normally for high priced items that can have individual prices, right? Like TVs, laptops, different types of laptops. Apple MacBook is more expensive than a Acer Predator. So you can't have an average price for that. Or cars, for example. A VW Polo is less expensive than a Toyota Fortuner. So they must have individual prices. And that's why when you then count the stock, you will have to count how many Fortuners you have, how many VW Polos you have in order to see what is the value of your stock, right? Okay, that in a nutshell is your stock valuation. Let's start with the question and then I'll explain some more once I'm busy with the question. I'm going to just show the paper now. You have your question papers with you. You follow with me as I read, right? And then I will try my best to write as neatly and as big as possible. I'm going to take myself off the screen and come back as so that I can make the writing a little bit bigger. Okay. If you have any questions today, we're not going to allow you to switch on your mics or cameras because 2 weeks ago it was really a mess and we don't want that. We promise today will be better. So if you have a question, please post it in the chat box and then we will answer the questions in the chat box. Okay, let's start with the question. We'll start with question number 1. Howick branch FIFO. Inventory valuation. Mandy Jones is the owner of TV City that sells TV sets and has 2 branches or shops in KZN. The periodic stock system is used. No missing items were recorded for the financial year ended 28 February 2023. Howick branch FIFO. This branch sells Arctic TV sets. Calculate the value of closing stock of the Arctic TV sets on 28 February 2023 using the first in, first out method for 5 marks. Now remember what I said. You go to your very last. We see the block of our information. We go to the very last month. The very last month is January. There's 300 there. Then we see there's 60 returns and we see 4,100. That's 60 returns. 4,100. The only other amount that's 4,100 is the January purchases. So I would take that 60 Rand, sorry, take it for me and go and put it next to your 300 in brackets and say minus 300. So 300 minus 60 will give you 300 minus 60 will give you 240.
Leonida?
I said, yes, sir.
Daar waar jy skryf kan ons niks sien nie. Dis so half aan die linkerkant. Dis nie op jou bladsy nie.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Daar's hy.
Fine now.
Lyk so al of jou visualizer bietjie uit fokus uit is.
Okay.
Daar's hy. Nou hy was nou net reg, nou is hy bietjie weer uit.
Okay.
Ja, it's a little bit okay, bietjie. Ja, hy lyk nou beter. He look better. Ja, baie beter. Much better.
Okay. This 60 of the returns. I said when you see that 60 of the returns, you take it to the month where it belongs. Now, if I look at this 4,100, the only other 4,100 I see is for January, right? So then I will take that 60 to my January and write it there in brackets so that I don't forget it. And then I'll say 300 minus 60 will give me 240, right? Then I carry on. My closing stock is 270. So your goal is to make up this 270, right? So let's go to our answer sheet. So 270 I have to make up. So starting from my last batch that I bought, I have bought 300, but of the 300, I returned 60, so I'm only left with 240. And remember, your cost price will always remain the same. So I'm going to have 240 times 4,100, right? That's my first calculation. But now I can see 240 is not equal to 270. So I will take my 270 and I minus my 240. What will I be left with? 30. Where will this 30 come from? It will have to come from the September batch because that's our second last batch. And this September batch was bought at 4,000 rands a unit. So that will then be my cost price for September, right? So times 4,000. And then we do our calculations. 240 times 4,100 gives me 984,000. And then I will take my 30 times 4,000 gives me 120,000. Then I will add the 2 plus 984,000 and it gives me 1,104,000. Right. Just to say that again, your goal is to make up this, the value of this closing stock, right? Prices always remains the same. You start with your very last batch. If we didn't have that returns, then 2670 could have come all from the last batch. But because of the 60 returns, that 240 is your 300 minus 60, right? So because of that returns, we now only have 240. That's why I say FIFO is not complicated, but the returns is complicating your life here. And if you forget the returns, then these two figures are wrong. Because by now you understand that the cost price always remains the same. Whatever is listed as your cost prices remains the same. So you must be careful with your returns here. And if I had carriage here, there's no carriage in this particular question. But if I had carriage, then carriage would be added on the 270 only. So if carriage was 1 rand, then I would have to add 270 here for carriage on these units that was bought, right? Only the 270 for carriage, no more. But like I said, in this particular question, there was no carriage. Okay, let's continue. Calculate the stock holding period in days using the closing stock figure. Now, the closing stock figure is this amount that you've calculated, right? I've written already for myself. My formula that I need is average stock over cost of sales. But this is stock holding period in days using the closing stock figure, which means that figure that's there,
Please
I will
mute.
have to bring
Someone
it
please
down,
mute.
right? So 1,104,000 over cost of sales. Let's find our cost of sales. Cost of sales. There's my cost of sales. 6,010,000, right? 6,010,000 times, because they say in days, 365 over 1. Let's do the calculation. 1,104,000 divided by 6,010,000 times 365, and it gives us 67.04. But we can say 67 days because somewhere in the instructions, it normally tells us to 1 decimal, right? So we can say, because that 4 will take us to 0 in any case, so we can say 67 days. Okay. That was 1.1 and 1.2. 1.2, Durban branch SIM. This branch sells Pacific and Caspian smart TV sets. Mandy was concerned about the following issues. The Caspian smart TV set would be too expensive for her customers. High stock levels in all her products might negatively affect the business. Mandy expected to sell 1,000 Pacific TV sets in the 2023 financial year. She therefore adjusted the selling price of the Pacific TV sets in September and asked the bookkeeper to provide an analysis of the quarterly sales. Refer to information A and B. 1.2.1. Calculate the value of the closing stock of the Pacific TV sets on 28 February using the specific identification method. Right. So let's do that. I wrote here, for specific identification, I always remember it, that I need to look for my opening stock, I need to look for my purchases, I need to look for returns, my sales, and that will give me my stock on hand. So let's look for that. We're looking for Pacific stock on hand. There's our opening stock, 350 units. There is my purchases, 800, and there is my sales. I don't see anything about returns. So that's all we have to work with, right? Your opening stock, your purchases, and your sales. So let's do that. Our opening stock was 350 plus my 800 for my purchases minus my sales of 765. Okay, 350 plus 1,800, sorry, plus 800, 350 plus 800 minus 765. So I have 385 units on hand. Now this 385 units on hand must be times by the cost price. Now, I wish I could ask you a question, but you make so much noise, I can't even ask. This is the number of units that was bought, right? This is the total price that was paid for it. So if I would ask you a question, I would ask you, what is the unit cost of these TVs? Then you would say, take your 3,720,000 and divide it by 400. And we can see the unit cost will be the same because 400, 400, and it's 3,720,000, 3,720,000. So take your 3,720,000 and divide it by your 400. And it gives us, sorry, my calculator was out of view. Take your 3,720,000 divided by 400 and it gives me 9,300, which is then the cost price of the stock, right? So that 9,300 must then be taken and it will give me then my closing stock balance, 385, and it gives me, let's do it again, 385 times 9,300 gives me 3,580,500. Right. Okay. Then calculate the gross profit on the Caspian Smart TV sets on 28 February. I highlighted gross profit here because normally we are asked to calculate the gross profit, right? But in this instance, or we asked to calculate the markup, then we have the gross profit, or we have the sales and we have the cost of sales. But in this one, we asked to calculate the gross profit, so it was turned a little bit around. So if you look at this one, it gives you the markup percentage on cost of 60%. So we already have the markup. We don't have to calculate the markup again. So here you have your sales. Normally, we say sales minus cost of sales gives me your gross profit, right? That's why I say this one was a nice one. It was turned around a little bit. So here we have our sales. So what can we do to get our gross profit now? Because I don't see cost of sales here. So we're going to ask ourselves the question, what do we have? Divide by what you have times what you want. What do we have? We have this one, which is sales. Sales is equals to 160. What do we want? We want that 60%, because that 60% represent our gross profit. So we're going to take our sales times 60 divided by 160, because sales is equal to 160 and we want that 60%, which is our markup percentage, also equal to the gross profit. Let's do that then. So we'll have our 10,934,400, which is your sales amount. And we're going to say times 60, because that's what we want, over 160. Okay, let's do the calculation. 10,934,400 times 60 divided by 160. So then our gross profit is then 4,100,400 rands. Okay, this was a nice tricky one for us. (1.2.3) Comment on the quarterly sales of the Pacific TV sets and explain whether or not Mandy's adjustment of the selling price was a wise decision. Quote figures or calculation. When I moderate, I see a lot of times you guys leave these type of questions open. Don't leave any open spaces. We can't give marks to open spaces. And these type of questions, write something, try and answer it. Don't leave it open, because you can just benefit by getting maybe 1 or 2 marks. But if there's nothing written, then nobody can help you there. Okay, let's look at it. The quarterly sales. The bookkeeper provided Mandy with the following analysis of quarterly sales and stock holding periods. Pacific, they say we have calculate, we have to look at Pacific TV sets, right? So here's Pacific. So if you can look at it, March to May, the first quarter, we had sales of 250. And total sales of 3,375,000. Then June to August, we had 240. So it's down by 5 already. And you can see our total sales is also down by about 74,000 or so. Then September to November, look at the difference there, 245 to 160. We're going down, down, down. So was it a good decision? No, because our number of units that we are selling goes down each quarter, and our total sales is also going down, right? So they say comment on the quarterly sales of the Pacific TV sets and explain whether or not Mandy's adjustment of the selling price was a wise decision. So then you can say, no, it wasn't a wise decision, because every quarter the sales went down. But don't stop there. Go further and say that the sales went down by 5. You can be specific, focus on a specific one and say, from May or March, May to June, August, it went down by 5. or even June, August to September, November, it went down 245 to 160. Let me calculate the difference there. 245 minus 160, it reduced with 85 units, right? So talk in units when you talk about this one. Don't just say it went down. Yes, I can see it went down. How much did it go down with? And which quarter did it go down to? So be specific when you answer here. If you talk about your sales here, you say the amounts that it went down with. You even work in percentages to say it went down. If you look at March to May, and then December to February, if I take that 250 minus 110, it's 140. So that would be more than 50% that we went down in sales from the start of this year to the end of the year, or the first quarter to the fourth quarter. We went down a lot. So we can say unit sales dropped per quarter, and you've mentioned the figures from this quarter to that quarter, from the first one on 250 to the last one on 110 by 85 or by 56%. You mentioned that, right? You mentioned the total sales that decrease. You mentioned percentages. You are specific in your answering of these questions, right? Comment, I will show you later what the memo says specifically. Comment on the stock holding period of specific and Caspian TV sets. Stock holding period was noted here, 184 days and 71 days. 71 days is good and 184 days is bad. Now, why is it good and why is it bad? And don't just say bad and good, the bad and the good and the ugly. You say why it's bad. 71 days means it's selling out faster. People like this Caspian TV, right? 71 days is also not a long period for us to have TVs. That's about just about more than 2 months. In 2 months, the TVs won't change so much. But if you look at 184, a lot of our money is tied up in the Pacific stock, right? So a lot of money is tied up in that stock or working capital. We run the risk that these TVs can become outdated because 184 days is like 6 months. To sit with the same TV for 6 months, you could run the risk of the TV being outdated, because in that time a new TV would be on the market and you might not be able to sell these TVs, right? So 71 days for Caspian is good, not a lot of money tied up in stock. 184 for Pacific is bad. Why? Because it's too much stock on hand. A lot of our money is tied up in that stock. We run the risk of outdated stock because that's almost 6 months that we're having stock. And in the meantime, with technology changing, new TVs could come up on the market and people will not want to buy that stock anymore, right? Okay. Provide Provide 2 points of advice to Mandy on how she can rectify the high stock levels of some of her products without reducing prices offered to customers any further. Okay, so they should surely talk about the specific ones. I would say donations maybe to schools, maybe that will reduce the stock levels, and then that the donations can be tax deductible as well, right? So there's many things that Mandy can do that can help her with this, right? Um, okay. So I say donations, selling them. They say they don't want you to sell them at a lower price. Uh, Transfer the TVs maybe to a different branch where they are selling the TVs better, right? Advertise them, maybe introduce online sales, maybe different methods of selling them. I say donations already. Okay, give them as prizes to sports teams or schools that can sell them, can use them maybe. Uh, okay, I think that brings us to the end of 1.2.5. go to 1.3.
Leonida, just
Mr.
please up there before you go on. Peku Mosa, we are not taking hands now. Perhaps at the end of the question, but not now. You can lower your hand. And I just remind colleagues to fill in the attendance register, please. It is important for me to check it tonight. Thank you, Donkey Leonida. You can go on. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Lion Stores. The business owned by Al Lion sells one type of leather purse. The business uses the weighted average method and a periodic stock system to value stock. Refer to information A. Calculate the following for the financial year ended 28 February 2023. Value of closing stock, number of units missing. Explain two strategies that Lion could use to address the problem of customers stealing items. I'll take this one away. Okay. I said to you earlier in my introduction, for weighted average, you have opening stock plus the units of the opening stock below your lines. Then you have your purchases and the units of purchases below your line. Minus your returns, minus your units of the returns. That's how I remembered it for myself. Maybe that can also help you. This calculation, know it when you go into your exam room. This is easy 7 marks for you because all the information is given. All you need to know for weighted average, this is the formula that I need to calculate. Plus carriage, there's no units associated with the carriage because it's the carriage on the purchases that we've, on the stock that we've already bought, right? Times the number of stock on hand. So let's look for all our information. The first information I want is my opening stock. There's my opening stock. My units is 480. My rand value is 71,040. Let's write it in quickly. It's going to make a line. Okay. So 71 and 40. And my units, I said, is 480 plus. Now I'm looking for purchases. My total purchases was 2,000 and my total was 362,500. Right? It's all these amounts added and it's all these number of units added to 2,000, right? So let's use that, 2,000. And 362,000. Now I'm looking for returns. Can you see how easy it is if I know what I'm looking for? There's my returns. January, 30 units was returned. Unit price of 205 and it's 6,150. So I'm looking for that 30 and I'm looking for 6,150, right? Let's write it in. Minus 6,150. Minus my 30. Now I'm looking for my carriage, right? Next, they give me carriage on purchases. Total carriage of 20,960 was paid for purchases during the year. Lion stores were not reimbursed for carriage on returns, which means we can use that whole amount as the carriage, right? So plus 20,960. And now I can do my calculation, right? Help me with the calculation. And then you calculate for me on that side the average price. I'm not going to write all my calculations here. You can do it on your side because I've written my formula on top, so I don't have a lot of space here. So I'm just going to calculate my weighted average price here for myself. So 71,040.
There are two schools, please mute. Switch off your cameras. The Bane Umpias. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay,
sorry, Andrews.
No, it's fine, sir. 71 and 40 plus 362,500 minus 6,150 plus 20,960, right? get 448,350. Then 2,000 plus my 480. 2,000. Just go back. 71,040 plus 362,500 minus 6,150 plus 2960. So I said 448,350, right? Then 480 plus 2,000 minus 30 gives me 2,450. So then I will use my 448,350 divide 2,450 and it gives me 183, right? So 183 is my average price times my number of units on hand. Did you see your number of units on hand anyway? Yes. In the first column, it says stock balances, 28 February. So my units on hand is 360. So times 360, and that will then give you your value of your stock, right? 183 times 360 gives me 65,800. 65,880. Okay, that is your weighted average. Easy peasy. Number of units missing. Once again, I've written here that I'm always looking for these things. My opening stock, and you work in units, it's always easier. Opening stock plus purchases minus your returns minus your sales minus your stock on hand gives you your stolen items. So you study this formula. So if they ask you in the exam these questions, then you already know what you are looking for, right? And you don't fumble around. So let's look for it. Number of you opening stock. My opening stock was 480, right? Plus my purchases plus 2,000 minus my returns. Okay. Minus my sales. My sales units were sold was 2,050, right? So minus 2,050 and minus my stock on hand, which is 360, right? Help me do the calculation. So I have my opening stock, my purchases, my returns, my sales, and my stock on hand, right? So 480 plus 2,000 minus 30 minus 2,050 minus 360 will give me 40 units. So 40 units is then my stolen stock, right? Okay, see, easy if you remember it like that. Sometimes they would ask you with this question, if there's a problem, then you still do the same question, the same calculation, and your answer might be 0 here, then you can say, no, the business is not having a problem because there's no stolen items, right? Explain 2 strategies that Lion could use to address the problem of customers stealing items. They didn't tell me anything about cameras, so your favorite one always cameras. Install CCTV cameras. We are selling leather purses. Maybe make sure that the tracking devices on the products. If I go to stores like Mr. Price and Truworths, they have a little gadget on the clothes. So if you go out of the store and you did not pay for the clothes, then that gadget, when you go through that turnstile, will make a noise. So those are like tracking devices. Provide lockers for the customers, like at ShopRite. When you go there, they have small little lockers where you can put your stuff in, so that you don't walk with your other groceries into the store. And that's also a way that they prevent the goods from being stolen. Also, they have securities that check your slips to make sure that you bought what's on your slip is indeed what is in your bags, like at Macro and at Mr. Price and stores like that. They have security guards at the doors that will check your purchases to make sure. So those are strategies that you can employ to make sure that your goods are safeguarded. That brings us to the end of this question on inventory. We've talked quite a lot about inventory now, so I hope it's a bit more clear to you. I think we can quickly take questions.
Okay, I will quickly check if there's any question. I was not in the chat, it's fine. Is there anyone who want to ask a question for me, Andrews? Please raise your hand. Peku, Mosa. Now I can take your hand, or is it old or new? Unmute before you start.
And just indicate the question number as well, please.
Yes, please go. Just unmute yourself, right?
Hello.
Yes, go on.
I was wondering if you would please start. Please start from the beginning.
What do you say?
I was having a very difficult time.
Please unmute.
Unmute.
Hello.
Yes, go on.
Hello, sir. We can hear you. Talk to us.
I was having a very difficult time with network and electricity.
Okay.
Yes.
We are busy recording it, so we will make the recording available to the schools after this. Then you can listen to it again. We can unfortunately not restart that question again because I have a second question on manufacturing that I have to do. So we will make the recording available, and I will also send out the memo after this meeting to your schools so that your teachers can have the marking guide to show to you guys tomorrow, okay?
Right, thank you. Please switch off your mic. Your mic as well, thank you. Leonida, we can go on.
Let me start with question 2. No more questions.
Thank you.
No more answers. No more questions on question 1.
Nothing which I see so far. We can go to question 2.
If you can just give me a minute, then I'll be with you. Okay, our next question that we're going to deal with deals with manufacturing. Now, manufacturing or production is the process of producing our goods in the business. So when you are dealing with manufacturing, we're talking about direct materials. We're talking about direct materials. These are the materials that we must use to make the actual products. If we are making tables, then we will have wood for the tops of the tables. We will have steel for the legs of the tables. We will have nails And these are all part of our direct materials. Then we have our direct labor. Direct labor, they are the people who will assemble the table and will make the actual tables, right? Then we have factory overhead costs. These are all the other costs that's indirectly involved in the production process. Like for example, you need a building where you're going to do your products, right? Where you're going to make your products. You need somebody to clean the factory where we are producing our products. These are all indirect costs, right? You need cleaning materials. These are your indirect materials that you need in the factory process, right? Then you also have administrative costs, but these costs are necessary for the products, but it is not part of the factory costs. Then you have selling and distribution costs or sales costs. These costs are also necessary for our products, but it's not part of our production process. The end product will then be sold. Then that's out of our hands, right? That's important to note, especially when you do the factory overhead note, that you only want to deal with factory costs, right? You're not concerned with administration. We're not concerned with selling and distribution costs, and unless you are doing the abridged income statement, right? So when we talk manufacturing, we only talk factory. Factory overheads, only factory. If you see a ratio, the first thing you do, you add. If it's 4 to 2 to 1, then it's 4 plus 2 plus 1, which will give you 7. So factory normally gets the biggest portion, so factory will get 4 over 7. Or they will tell you factory takes up 75% of the space, so it uses 75% of the rent expense or the water and electricity expense. You go with the information that is given to you, right? So you read your information and remember, earlier I said to you when I calculated gross profit, divide by what you have times what you want. That question you must ask yourself also a lot. What are they giving me? Because sometimes they're giving you administrative cost, but you actually want factory. So then you divide by the administrative cost times the percentage of the factory that you want. So you ask yourself, what do I have and what do I want? So divide by what you have times what you want, right? We also have the break-even point calculation in manufacturing. This is the number of units that we have to sell to cover our fixed cost. Once we've covered our fixed cost, we then start making a profit. So the idea with the break-even point, first of all, the calculation. Calculation of break-even point is your total fixed cost over your selling price per unit minus your variable cost per unit. The idea of the break-even point is for the break-even point and the production level to be far apart from each other, because the more units you make more than break-even, the more profit you are making in your business. And your idea is to make a good profit in the business, right? So if your break-even point is, let's say, 5,000, then ideally you would want your production or the number of units produced to be, let's say, 10,000. Then you're making a profit on the 5,000 extra units that you have produced, right? If your break-even is 5,000 and you're only making 5,200, then you're only making a profit on 200 units, which is very low for you, right? You're still covering your costs, but you are not making a good profit. But if your break-even is 5,000, but you're only making 3,000, you are operating at a loss. You're not even covering your costs, which is not good for you, right? So your loss, you 2,000 you are short, at least covering your costs. And your idea is to make a profit in this business. So that is the purpose of the break-even point. We calculate it. First, we'll calculate it. Then the next part of the question will ask you to comment on the break-even point, right? Back to your production costs. Your production cost statement. The statement is mostly for method marks, but you must know the format production cost statement. It's maybe 8 or 10, or in this question it's 13 marks. It's normally not a lot of marks, but it is a lot of marks that, or method marks. How many marks do you need to pass this paper? 45, but we don't just want 45. We want at least to get to 50%. Use this accounting as one of those 50% subjects, right? I always say to my people, 50% is a pass, nothing less than that. If we don't get 50% for accounting, we don't consider it as a pass. So use these type of questions to push your marks a little bit, right? Let's start with a question and then I'll explain a little bit more. Here you can still see.
Yeah, I can see the question paper. Yes, I see you take yourself away. I can see it now.
Yes, I take myself away so that the paper can be a little bit bigger.
Can you increase your screen a bit, or is it not possible?
Let's see.
Okay, now it take a few away. Now it's fine.
Is it fine?
Yeah, we can start. Thanks, Leonida.
Okay.
And colleagues, remember the
Alright.
attendance. Right, Leonida, you can go. Andrews.
Okay. I just want to the business uses. Oh, I think you've muted.
No, I
Okay,
don't
I'm not
mute
muted.
anyone. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Protea Manufacturers is a small manufacturing business that produces one type of fabric basket. The business uses the weighted average method to value their raw material stock. You must also look the last few years. I see a lot of this integration of different topics into other topics. Remember earlier we did stock and then we had weighted topic like manufacturing, for example. So the business uses the weighted average method to value their raw material stock. Their financial year ended on 30 June 2023. Calculate the labor cost. Prepare the production cost statement for the year ended 30 June 2023. Identify one problem relating to the supervision of workers. Quote figures. Suggest one strategy the business can use to improve the supervision of workers. Okay, we have to do direct labor cost and we have to do the production cost statement. But when I work on my production cost or manufacturing point like A, what do you normally get in A? In A, we get our opening balances and we get our closing balances. In this particular question, we only have work in progress opening balance, which means this question mark means what? I will be given the cost of production of finished goods and this figure will be a balancing figure, right? Or I'm given both of these figures work in progress, then I know I have to work my way to my cost of production of finished goods, right? So opening stock, I always say, in my case, I want to go and place my figures. When I start with A and I place the figures wherever they belong. Let's go see our production cost statement quickly. This is my production cost statement. Work in progress on the 1st of July. Then I will already write my 22,400. Doing that, I'm already picking up my first mark. Then I don't go up and down, right? So there's nothing else for me to use. I said to you, this one is a question mark. So this one will most likely, the work in progress at the end of the year would most likely be a balancing figure for you because these three work together, right? So you will either be given this one, the work in progress at the beginning, or work in progress at the end, or total cost of production of finished goods. The three work together. So here I'm only given this one. So somewhere along the line, I'll be given this one, right? Then I will have to work my way back to find this answer here. But as I read my information, if I had more information in A, I would go and place it wherever it belongs, right? If I had, let's say, indirect materials, I would go and place it in my factory overhead. If I had direct material opening and closing, I would place it where it is. So your A is your opening and closing balances. And I want to tell you, start by placing these balances. Now I'm done with A. I don't have to reread A all the time, right? Then I have B, raw material stock. A total of 45,000 meters of fabric was issued from the storeroom for production. The weighted average cost per meter is 11 rands and 65. This is your raw material stock. What is another word for raw material stock? Direct material cost, right? A total of 45,000 meters of fabric was issued from the storeroom for production. If they say the word issued, it means this is my final answer that must go to my production cost statement. So you look for that word issued, right? If we've issued it, it means that's what went to the storeroom for production, and that's what we use. So I'm going to take my 45,000 and times it by my 11 rands and 65 cents to get my direct material cost. Let's do that. Okay. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm not starting with 2.1.1 because I have not received any information yet on 2.1.1. So as I read my information, I'm going to that point where it is needed so that I don't have to read up and down, up and down. Even missing some information, right? But that's not what I do. I read them A, B, C, right? And as I get my information, I start filling up where I need that information. Like now, I have direct material costs. I'm going to my production cost statement and I'm going to write my direct material cost. Open my bracket, 45,000 meters times 11 rands and 65 cents, right? 45,000 times 11 rands and 65 cents. It gives me 524,250. Okay. Now I'm done with B. I don't have to read B again, right? C, direct labor. Direct labor is one of those ones that you normally struggle with. I always say, as you read 5 workers, you write down 5 workers, right? So 5 is your starting. Already you're getting one conditions. They must work 8 hours normal time per day for 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year. And they must produce 2 fabric baskets an hour during normal time and overtime. Details relating to the number of hours worked by the workers and the remuneration rates for the financial year ended 30 June 2023. Now, the normal time is your starting point. We have 5. Remember I said when you read 5, you already write 5 workers, right? 5 workers. Number of workers times hours times rate equals to your normal time, right? So 5 workers times how many hours did they work? They worked 1,400 hours. What was the rate per hour? 40. Number of workers 5. And then the total we have to calculate, right? So let's write it. Normal time, number of hours, 1,400 times the rate, 40 equals to normal time, right? So 5 times 1,400 times 40 gives me 280,000. Okay. Overtime. Overtime, 960 hours per worker. So don't forget your 5. So you start always with 5 workers, work 960 hours times the rate, right? Now in this particular question, we were not given the rate. But if they gave you the rate and they say the rate is 1.5 times, then you would take this 40 and you would times it by 1.5. So 40 times 1.5 would give you 60, right? So that's why I say in this particular example, we were not given we were given the answer already. Can you see that? But normally they say to you, the rate is 1.5 times the normal rate. Or they will say the rate is 50%. Which is also 1.5 or 40% or 70% more than the normal time. Then you take that 40 and you times it by 1.70 and then you will get your answer for your overtime rate. Remember, overtime rate must be more than normal time rate according to the Employees Labor Acts, right? So here we were given the 384,000 for overtime. So there's nothing that I can do further with that one. So I'm just going to add it. 384,000. Right. I've added. That's my overtime, right? Then here's a note that I must read. The employer's contribution amounts to 11.5% of normal time. 11.5% of this 280,000, right? So I'm going to say this is your normal time. This is your overtime. So contribution would be 280,000 times 11.5%, right? Let's do it quickly. 280,000 is your normal time times 11.5 divided by 100. It gives us 32,200. So 32,200. And then I must add these three amounts, right? So 32,000, let's start at the top, 280,000. 280,000 plus 384,000 plus 32,200 gives me 696,200. Where must this 696,200 go to? It must go to my production cost statement, right? So I take it down immediately before I forget about it. So it goes there. There's direct labor cost, 696,200. In whatever answer you have here, take your answer down to direct labor cost. Don't change it now when you get there, because if you take that same answer, you get what we call a method mark, right? For the same answer, but it can't be a different answer. It must be your same answer. And hopefully it's the right answer, then you can at least get the mark. But if you take this answer and you put it down there, 1 mark is yours guaranteed. Okay. Then I can already add up my prime cost here. So 696,200 plus 524,250 gives me 1,220,450. Okay. Now I need my factory overheads, right? Factory overheads. All right, let's see what we have now. We've now dealt with C also. You see, I'm done with C, right? So you don't have to reread all my things. D, factory overhead cost. The bookkeeper calculated the factory overhead cost at 134,900. However, he made the following error, which must still be adjusted. Now, before we read this error, let's quickly talk about factory overheads. Factory overhead note carries more marks than the actual production cost statement, right? So you must make sure that you know this note very well. It normally goes with the adjustments where you have to read, and that's why I said earlier to you, you must remember when you deal with factory overheads, only factory. You don't want administration cost there, you don't want selling and distribution cost in there. You must remember if there's an adjustment to add or subtract the adjustment and then work out the percentage, right? Let's say, for example, they say rent was paid for 13 months, which means 1 month must be subtracted. So you first do the adjustment and then you calculate the 60% or the 50% or whatever the percentage is. The same with the floor space. If they say to you the floors, the factory takes up 1,000 square meters. When I saw the square meters the first time, I thought to myself, I must be funny with square meters. You do nothing with square meters. You just ignore square meters and you only work with 1,000 over, let's say, 2,300, right? Or over whatever they give you. You just work with the figures. You don't worry about the square meters. Now I must do square meters and I don't know anything about square meters. I also don't know much about square meters, but all I know is that if I get the rent expense and it says to me square meters, I only work with the figures that's given to me. If it's a ratio that you are given, as I said earlier, 4 to 2 to 1, you first add up all the three amounts, 4 plus 2 plus 1 give me 7, then factory gets 4 over 7. So first you deal with the adjustment and then you deal with the portion that goes to the factory, right? If there's an error, then you might have to subtract the amount, and that's sometimes confusing for you. It's almost like the adjusted net profit in the paper one or your income statement. So remember, sometimes the amounts can also be subtracted in the factory overheads. Like in this example, where they've done the factory overhead, now we just have to make a correction. So remember, sometimes amounts can be subtracted. That's when you have to make corrections. Then it has to be subtracted maybe if it was added too much or too little. Okay, so let's look at this one. He included the full amount of 33,600 for water and electricity expense. Only 75% of the expense must be allocated to the factory. The balance is an administrative cost. Remember, I said we don't want even nothing to do with administration costs. We only want our 75% that belongs here, right? So they added 33,600. What is 75 of 33,600 times 0.75? It's 25,200. So we should have added 25,200. But instead of adding 25,200, we added 33,600. Now we have two figures we must work out the difference, right? 33,600 minus 25,200, and it gives us 8,400. 8,400 too much or 8,200 too little? Clearly, 8,400 too much. So we have two options. You can either subtract the whole 33,000, then your account is fine now. Then you add to 25,200. Okay, that's one option. Or you can just subtract the 8,400 and then your account will still be correct. So you decide which one works for you better. Subtract 33,600 because that's an error, mistake that was made, and then you add the 25,200, or you just subtract the difference because your water and electricity expense should only be 25,200 and not 33,600 as we have added there. Okay. So let's do it quickly. So factory overhead starts with 134,900. Then I'm just going to say minus 8,400. Where did I get 8,400? It's 33,600 minus 25,200, right? Where did I get 25,200? It's 75% of 33,600. Going to calculate 134,900 minus 8,400 gives me 126,500. Now I'm going to add that to my prime cost plus
Hello, Leonela.
right. 126,500 is my, yeah. Yes, Mr. Fashia?
Yeah, you were just a little bit away,
Well, okay.
but you're back, fine.
Am I back? Okay. I said I take my factory overhead cost plus my prime cost, and it gives me 1,346,950, right? Then I'm going to add my work in progress, 22,450 plus 22,450, and it gives me 1,369,400. Okay. Remember, I wasn't given this amount, so now I must look for something here at least, right? In information E, the business produced 20,500 fabric baskets during the financial year at a unit cost of 65 rands. Once again, if I could ask you which answer is this, you would say the cost of production of finished goods, right? How many baskets did we make? 20,500. What was the cost of these baskets? 65 rand. So this is my final answer then for my production cost statement, right? So this is here, cost of production of finished goods. It's 20,500 times 65. $20,500 times 65 rands, and it gives me 1,332,500. Okay, now the only figure that's missing is this one. So we calculate the difference between these two, and it will give me my answer here, right? So minus 1,369,400, and it gives me 36,900. And remember, work in progress at the end must be in brackets. Why? Because it will be seen as the opening stock for next 1,369,400 minus 36,900, and it gives me 1,332,500. Can you see how I wasn't going up and down in saving time in answering my question on manufacturing? And this method can be used for all of your other questions as well. Income statement, you read your adjustments one by one. You read one BRS one by one. And that's how you go about it. That will save you a lot of time during your exam, instead of trying to get one thing done at the same time. You have your answer sheet in front of you, and every figure that you put on your answer sheet is a mark for you. So as soon as you put that figure in the right place, but you need to know your formats as well for that. But as soon as you put your figure on the answer sheet in the right place, then it's already a mark for you, right? So you are picking up marks as you are reading your questions the whole time. Okay. Before we go to 2.1.3, Mr. Foshia, must we take a question or can I carry on? Okay, let's carry on.
I think there is a question, Leonida.
Okay, Makwatsi, can you assist?
Yeah, I see a hand, but I can't figure out, or is it Peku? Pheko Musa, and Solofelo Mukwin. In that order, colleagues. Pheko Musa, can you ask your question, unmute and ask the question? If you have raised a hand.
Okay, Makwatsi, they can ask now. Let me finish this question quickly.
Yeah, I think you should finish the question first.
Okay. Identify one problem relating to the supervision of workers and quote figures. Suggest one strategy the business can use to improve the supervision of workers. The first problem is the workers work only 1,400 hours. But if you calculate it in the information that we were given, they said they must work 8 hours normal time per day for 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year. So if you take that calculation, they say 5 weeks, they say 8 hours times 5 days times 48 weeks. It means they should have worked 1,000.
Andrews, you have muted.
Okay, is it okay again?
Yes, we are back now.
Okay. As I was saying, they were supposed to work 8 hours normal time, 5 days a week, 48 hours a week. If you calculate that, it gives you 1,920, right? So 5 hours, 5 weeks, 8 hours, 5 days, 48 weeks gives you 1,920. Yet they only worked 1,400 hours. But look at the overtime hours. It's more than half of the normal hours. So clearly there's a problem with supervision there, right? If they had worked their normal 1,920 hours, then they would not need to work so much of overtime hours. Do you agree? So that's the one problem. The workers do not work the normal time hours according to their employment conditions, right? And their overtime hours is too much. So you quote the 1,400, you say that it should be 1,920, and you can also bring in overtime here. That's more than double. If I work out the percentage, I'm sure it will be 60-70% of the normal time that's allocated to overtime. If you even look at the amount, the normal time was 280,000, but the overtime is 384,000. Your overtime is not supposed to be so much more than your normal time, right? A second problem that I identify is they say to us, they must produce 2 fabric baskets an hour during normal time and overtime. So if you take their 2,360 hours that they've worked, they're supposed to make the 2 fabric baskets an hour during normal time and overtime. But if we can look at it, they only made 20,500 baskets. Let's see how many baskets they were supposed to have made. 2, 3 hours per worker. They must produce 2 fabric baskets an hour. So they work for 2,360 hours. So they must make 2 baskets, and each worker must make 2 baskets. So they were supposed to make 23,600 baskets, but they only made 20,500 baskets. So even the number of baskets that they made does not tally with the hours that they've worked. So definitely there's a problem with supervision there. So remember, when you answer these type of questions, you must be specific about the problem and you must quote your figures to say that this information here was just given to help you to solve the problem. The one shows you the hours that they were supposed to work. This one shows hours, and this shows you number of baskets, right? So that's you're supposed to use that in this in the answering of the problem 1 and the problem 2. So the first problem is hours work, right? Hours. The second problem is number of baskets. And these are the type of questions that you just leave out, right? So what is the solution here for the hours? Workers should be supervised, right? Overtime hours can maybe only start once normal hours for the day are over, right? Monitor the workers as they work. Number of baskets, maybe pay them according to the baskets that they've completed, right? Monitor the baskets that they work, pay them for the baskets that they've made and so on, right? So be practical in your solutions when you answer these type of questions. But most important, do not leave open spaces. Do not leave open spaces. If I put 2 ticks here, I always say that is corruption because there's nothing written there. But if you write some story there, maybe I can find some sense in it and at least give you 1 mark for that answer, right? So please don't leave any open spaces. Write something there. Okay, that is the first part of the question. Then I'm going to start with my second part of the question. Mr. Makwatsi, do you have questions for me?
Few hands here, 3 hands.
Okay, ask quickly.
It's Solofelo. I don't know if Solofelo raised it by mistake. And then Senzile combined. Can Senzile ask the question, unmute and ask the question? Okay, and Lindiwe Matamani.
Munir, the question says that the employer's contribution, like, should we calculate it before we record it, or we should like write it as it is?
Say again. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the question. Can you just repeat for me?
Okay, the question is that the employer's contribution amounts to 11.5% of normal time wage. So I was asking that, should it be calculated before recorded, or we just gonna record it as it is?
You must calculate the 11.5% of the 280.
Okay. Thank
Remember
you.
the 280 is your normal time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So then you calculate 11.5% of that normal time, and then it must be added because remember, the employer's contribution makes up part of the expense of this production cost or the direct labor cost. Did we answer your question? Hello?
I think he is answered me.
Okay,
Can
carry on?
Senzile ask the question? Senzile combined. All right, if Senzile is struggling, Tabo Ompi, Tabana Ompi.
Ma'am, can you please repeat the solution to problem number 2?
The baskets one.
Yes, they produced less
Okay.
baskets.
Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you exactly what the memo says, right? And then I'll
Okay.
explain it from there for you. Let's start with problem number 1. The workers do not work the normal time according to the employment conditions. Only 1,400 instead of the 1,920. You know how I calculated that 1,920, right? The workers work too much overtime as compared to normal time. There they've worked out a 69%, right? That could be your 960 divided by 1,4. So your 960 over 1,4 would give you that 69% there, right? Then the level, problem number 2, the level of production is too low. For the 2,360, they said they must make 2 baskets per hour, per person, right? So each person of the 5 workers must make 2 baskets. So in 1 hour, we expect 10 baskets. So if these workers work 2,360 hours, then and there's 5 of them, and they're supposed to make 2 baskets, it comes to 23,600 baskets, right? But they only produce 20,500, which is 3,100 less baskets than what they are supposed to have made. So obviously they are not being well, because this question is about supervision. Are they being well supervised? Obviously not, because they don't work their normal time that they're supposed to work, and they don't make the number of baskets that they're supposed to make. So solutions for that would be better workers should be monitored to ensure that they work the correct number of normal hours. Workers must first work the correct number of normal time before booking overtime, right? So say, for example, in a day, a worker must work 8 hours. Then he must first work his 8 hours, and then say 2 hours of the day will be normal time, would be overtime. Not first, not work enough hours, but then he claims overtime. So overtime should not be as high as the overtime is in this question. Then for the baskets, monitor workers to ensure that they produce 2 fabric baskets per hour. Pay workers for each fabric basket completed or complete uncompleted task under normal time, normal hours. The normal hours should actually be enough for them to be able to complete their baskets. But they want to, obviously, overtime pays them more than normal time. And you can see the overtime is 384,000, which is almost 100. It is 104,000 more than the normal time. And it's not supposed to be like that. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome. All right, can we
May
go on
increase
to the
bit-
next question?
Before you go to the next question, there are learners who have unmuted their camera. Can they please mute their camera, please? Thank you. All right. The next person will be Mokhele and Makhalanyan. Mokhele and Makhalanyani, unmute and ask your question. All right. Maybe Mokhele is
Struggling, you will come back to him. Can we carry on? Mr. Mukwatsi, can I go on?
okay. Ask your question. Anyone who has raised up their hand, please ask the questions.
Ma'am, I've been struggling with the factory overhead cost. I don't know, you said there must be an amount that must be subtracted. I just didn't get which amount should be subtracted and where should it be subtracted as well.
Okay. You would remember I said the factory overhead amount is 134,000, right? The bookkeeper already calculated this amount, right? However, he made the following error. He added 33,600 for water and electricity. No? But only 75% of this expense must be allocated to the factory. So you understand that 33,000 was too much, right? It should have only been 75. So if you take 33,600 and you calculate 75 of that amount, then it gives you 25,200. And I said there's two ways of dealing with it. It's either you first subtract the 33,300, thereby cancelling that amount. Then you add the correct amount, which is 25,200.
Okay.
Or you can just calculate the difference between the two, 25,200. So hence in your factory overhead note, you took your 134,900 and I minus that 8,400. And I said, where does the 8,400 comes from? It's 33,600 minus my 25,200, right? Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's carry on. Okay, we go to 2.2 now. If you have any more questions, keep them for later. Remember to switch off your cameras and your mics. It has been going extremely well today and we appreciate that. Let's deal with the last part of the question and call this a successful day for today. Quencher bottle manufacturers. Quencher bottle manufacturers produces and sells bottles. The business is owned by Ronnie Shai. The financial year ended on 31 July 2023. Provide a calculation to confirm that the break-even point of 2,520 units for 2023 is correct. If they ask you to provide a calculation to confirm, then your answer should basically get to this answer, right? Okay, let's look at it. The break-even point, what is the formula to calculate break-even point? Total fixed cost over selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, right? So let's find this information. Here's our information. We have fixed cost, 21 Rand a unit, 15 Rand, 6 Rand. Then we have variable cost. We only have unit cost. So my question to you would be, how will I get from unit cost to the total Rand value of my fixed cost that I need, right? So I will have to take my number of units produced and sold, which is 3,000, times it by my unit cost to get my Rand value, because I want to work with my total fixed costs, right? So let's do that. So total fixed cost is 3,000 times 21. So 3,000 times 21 and it gives us 63,000, right? Do it here, 63,000. Then let's find my selling price and my variable cost. Here's my variable cost, 75 rands per unit. And here's my selling price, 100 rands per unit, right? So now I say 100 minus 75 is 2,520. So this break-even point that we were given is indeed correct. Okay, and that was our job for that question. Comment of the level of production achieved and the break-even point on the 31st of July. Quote figures. I always say you answer this question like you're answering for your mom who don't know anything about accounting. So you start and you say your break-even point is equal to 2,520, right? You start with saying your number of units produced is 3,000, right? You calculate the difference between the two, 3,000 minus 2,520. For a you can also talk about last year and this year, right? Last year, let's look at last year's information. Last year, our number of units produced and sold was 2,500, right? 2,500 minus the break-even point of 1,643. So there was 857 here, 857. And now this year, there's only, what did we say? 480. Okay, so can you see our profit is actually less that we are making, right? Our units are more, so you can also say we are making 500 more units, but our break-even point increased, which means our profit this year is now also starting point, break even. If you also have to go to the previous year, 2022, we made 857 more than break even point, right? Which means although the number of units that we produce increased, we still made more profit. Because remember, every unit after break-even point is the profit that you are making, right? So if we want to look at it like that also, we can also look like that. But I always advise, always start with the basic one that says break-even to number of units produced and that we are making a profit for this year, right? Okay. Provide two possible reasons for the change in the direct material cost per unit. Let's look at it. Direct material cost in 2022, it was 32 rands. And now in 2023, it's 40 rands. So it increased with 8 rands. What is the first thing that comes to mind? Transport cost. Our petrol cost went up in the last year with a lot of money. So the biggest contributor, I would say, is our transport cost here, right? So the transport cost, the carriage increase, that could be our biggest problem. We're not able to get bulk discounts, maybe. Maybe there's a lot of mistakes or wastage of raw materials. So we can say wastage could push up that price? We can say transport. I'm just writing short sentences. You do not answer in one word sentences. You write a full sentence. There was wastage of raw material that could have caused the increase in the raw material cost. Transport costs, the petrol prices went up, which resulted in an increase in the transport cost of raw materials from the place we bought it to our place, or the carriage on the raw materials. You write full sentences. Bulk discounts. Everybody's tightening their belts. People don't want to give discounts anymore. So we could maybe not make use of bulk discounts, or even maybe ourselves did not have the money to buy goods and so on, right? Okay, but full sentences. Not just one word answers here. The owner, Ronnie, does not understand why the fixed cost per unit decreased, although the production has increased. Proof one explanation. Okay, so fixed costs. Let's look at fixed costs. In 2022, fixed cost was 23 Rand a unit. In 2022, 23 Rands a unit. 2023, 21 Rands a unit. So there was a decrease of 2 Rands in this cost. Why? What comes to mind immediately? Go and look at the number of units produced. Last year, we had 2,500 units produced. This year, we have 3,000 units produced. What comes to mind? We made more. The more units we make, the lesser our fixed costs. Because remember, the fixed cost remains the same, irrespective of the number of units produced. Right? So the fixed cost remains the same. So if you produce a lot of units, then our fixed cost will come down. So what do we call that? Economies of scale, right? Remember, if you have, let's say, rent expense is 5,000 Rand. Whether you make a lot of units or less units, the fixed cost, the rent expense will still be the same, right? We call that economies of scale. Because we have produced more units, our fixed cost per item could come down, because the fixed cost remains the same irrespective of the number of units produced. Okay, remember that economies of scale. It comes up a lot, and we keep on forgetting that economies of scale. I think last year there was even diseconomies of scale, but which is the opposite of economies of scale.
Yeah, and it was even in the June supplementary paper, it was this economics of scale.
Oh, so you must be wary for this economies of scales as well. Then the last things that I want to say with the factory overheads, go and look at your ledger accounts as well. Your raw material ledger accounts from grade 11. Those accounts helps us with to calculate your notes. And also you will see the work in progress ledger account is very much the same as the production cost statement. Go and look at your finished goods ledger accounts. That can also help you to calculate certain figures, right? So go and look at those ledger accounts just to familiarize yourself a little bit to see how to get to certain figures in our papers, right? That we did not perhaps deal with today. But I think that if there's no questions, then that will bring us to the end of today's discussion.
I think there's a hand of Beinsvlei. Yes, Beinsvlei. Beinsvlei, just unmute and ask your question.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, dear.
My classmates were asking about the economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They
What
were
about it?
asking for a further explanation about the economies of scale. That
If I can may Andrew, if I can come in quickly, ma'am. Say for example, Say, for example, you must pay a rent, right? Say, for example, you must pay rent. Say your rent per month is 1,000 rand, and you produce 100 units, meaning then your rent is 10 rand per unit because you're only producing 100 units. Are you fine? If we produce 1,000 units, then my rent is only 1 rand per unit. Is that acceptable for you? Meaning the more you produce, the most cheaper become your fixed cost per unit. That's the economics of scale. Are you sorted?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Pleasure, ma'am. Any other hands?
Any other question?
Plain fly hand. I don't see other hands. I don't know if Itzabit Singh, Francis Rasibakua Itzabit Singh, do you have a question? Okay, I see a hand of Benjamin Buang. Please ask your question. Mr. Buang? Seemingly Mr. Buang is now afraid to ask something.
Maybe all day.
Colleagues, whilst I'm waiting for a last hand, perhaps please make sure you fill in our attendance as requested. Mr. Mkwati will send now at 5 o'clock for me your attendance registers. Please fill it in quickly, as well as your number of learners who has attended it. And from my side, thank you, May Andrews, for a job well done. I'm pretty sure this will help you for next week, for when we do counting grade 12 paper 2. I like the last comment of her when she said, please don't forget to look to your ledger accounts, because work in progress is exactly a production cost statement. And if you remember well, a finished good account will give you the answer of your production cost statement. If they don't give you what is the number of units and multiply by price, then with a finished good account, you can work out your total cost of production. That's a small tip, Janiki. May Andrews, thanks a lot from my side. I think it's a job well done. Colleagues, please remember, Tabu, I will give you now a chance. Please remember next week and Tuesday, it's our grade 12 marking guideline discussion. I will mail tonight the question papers to the subject advisors to send it to you.